I'm Alexander Constantine, and you are listening to the Black Ibis Social Club. All right, it's me and the ever-present Fisto Sobani. What's up, Fisto?
Hey, hello there. How you doing,
And
man?
today we have a very special guest, Mr. Librarian of Celaeno himself. All right, probably my favorite Substacker out of all the Substackers on Substackistan. Welcome, Librarian.
Thank you very much. It's
All
kind.
right.
Hey, man.
So, it is the new year, right? 2025, right? And if you've noticed on the different art and the different introduction stuff to the podcast, we have a new name. And I did post a pretty in-depth explanation of why I changed the name. And the reason is because the old name was kind of esoteric and weird, and it was very me. And because I did officially invite Fisto to be my co-host, and because I owe it to all the hosts to have a name that is easily pronounceable and easily be shareable, we decided to go with the Black Ibis Social Club. Maybe because I was listening to Pink Pony Club a lot. I don't know. I don't know. And that's not the reason. There's a bunch of reasons for it. But that's what we're going to be going on from now on. And it's going to, my Substack and podcast Substack is going to reflect that. And, you know, when you listen to the Black Ibis Social Club, I want you to imagine one of those uh, private gentlemen's clubs with big oak bookcases, comfortable chairs, like cigar lounge, a bunch of esoteric Tolkien-like figures sitting around, uh, drinking tea, chiefing on pipes, and having discussions about philosophy and meaning of life. And that's what we're going to be doing here, okay? All right. So another topic, 2025. And I was thinking about this when I was driving home from work today. 25. That is a quarter of a century. And I think as people, we tend to have a hard time conceptualizing time or the passage of time. But if you think about it, all of us were alive 25 years ago. And for most of us, at least people that are my age and Fistos, I'm not sure how old you're a librarian, but that puts me squarely in high school right before 9/11. And now I have a very strict conceptual concept of what a quarter of a century is like. Okay. And that's interesting. And it makes you think about age and aging and the passage of time. But a quarter of a century ago, I, was getting ready for Y2K. I believe I was a freshman in high school, and I was about a year away from, 9/11. And that's a monumental uh, bullet point in our overall timeline, a critical bullet point. So now for us at my age, we have a conceptual idea of what a quarter of a century is, and we can use it to really understand historical time. And like, for example, you go 25 years in the other direction and where you are at that point, right? Which would place us in 1975, at the end of the Vietnam War, right? So that's pretty interesting, pretty cool when you think about it that way. At least to me in my tired driving from home kind of brain. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of going in the other direction, 2050.
2050, yeah.
Jeez. I mean, 9/11, right at the turn of the century, right? I was a senior in high school when Y2K happened, and which was still the most amusing New Year's party I've ever had, simply because nothing happened. And that made it really funny, you know. And then, a year later, 9/11. And then 2025, we've got the inauguration of Donald Trump. And there's going to be a bunch of seniors in high school who are probably going to look at this in 2050 going, oh my God. Like depending on how much happens, of course.
Right. I
But
mean, definitely the
man,
vibe shift, right? The
oh,
you know,
jeez,
and
freaking me out
no,
here, man. Looking back 25 years. Oh,
and well, you look
God.
25 years from now, and you're gonna be like
Oh,
2025, the year the Black Ibis Social Club first went live.
yeah. The greatest podcast in the history of mankind
Right.
debuted.
And the
Which, just a quick historical note. I wanted to point out, it's really funny to me that the last podcast we did was the one with Brad Kelly, like the weird tarot esoteric, and then we passed through the
that's
portal
true. That's
into
true. And
the
that's
new
why I
podcast.
timed it.
Yeah.
And wasn't that a great
Yeah.
episode, man? Brett Kelly is such a cool guy.
Oh my God. Yeah. And now here we are with
The
Librarian. Like,
officially the
we're-
best Substacker in my opinion. I mean, Librarian, your essays are some of the best. There's like a I think there's like a trifecta of my favorite writers on Substack, and you're up there. You're probably number one. John Carter of Mars is up there, but he's been kind of infrequent lately. I need to send him some mean messages. But yeah, man, you're a killer. So let's talk about you for a second. You want to introduce yourself to us?
yeah.
Well, yes, welcome. Thank you for having me very much, and it's all very kind. Thank you for the kind praise and everything. Librarian of Celaeno, I have been writing on Substack, I suppose, since June of 23. So I guess about a year and a half now I've been on here, coming up on 2 years in about 6 months. So something like that. So about 2 years. And I've really enjoyed it. I actually got you mentioned John Carter. Actually, I said before, I got my start as a commenter on his stuff. I was on Substack just kind of as a lurker, and then I read something of his and I wrote. He responded, he's very kind, and then I thought, well, I've got a little more to say. Let me see if I can get any traction with what I'm writing. And I've been very happy so far with the response I've gotten, with the great following that I have, and so many great commenters. And obviously, you two were both early people that I met on Substack, along with Alexander Helene, and I'm assuming he pronounces it that way.
Haleen.
And Haleen, okay, yeah, Alexander Helene, and several other people that I met early on that I've been very careful to follow all the way through. And it's just been a really great experience to me. One thing about being a teacher, and maybe Fisto can kind of relate to this,
Hmm.
is that you go to school and you're interested in your subject and you study all these things, and then you come in and you're talking to kids and you're just sort of repeating everything at the same level every year. You're kind of stuck in that one degree of history or one degree of political science or whatever it is you're talking about. And you can't really get beyond that because every year you get a fresh crop of people and you got to start at the beginning. So you're sort of just stuck in place. But writing gives you a chance to expand and really explore the ideas that got you into education in the first place. And so I really see it as kind of a supplement to my main career.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've definitely seen that. It's a little strange for me only because as an educator, I've only been doing the school thing for this is my third year, so it's still
Okay.
it's very, very, very fresh for me still. But I see what you mean. Like this third year is the first year that things are really settling into the groove that you just described. I'm sure by fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, if I stick with what we've been doing this year, which it looks like we probably are because it's going really, really well. I know I'm gonna see what you see. Um, for me too, like writing on Substack, like it's what you described there. But I think my favorite part about it is like today I was making jokes about on notes. I was making jokes about assigning Substack essays
I
for
saw
extra
that.
credit. It's such
Oh yeah.
it's such a good way to feel like as social studies because could you do history and social studies, right? That's your thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Yes.
doesn't it feel like we sit on the cutting edge of stuff?
I've assigned several Substack essays to my
Yeah.
students to read.
Yeah,
And
man.
I've actually toyed with the idea of assigning them one of mine, but really roasting it and telling them it's terrible, and
Yeah, this guy's a
I disagree
freaking
with this guy.
goddamn moron. Don't ever
Yeah,
look at
and
this
just
idiot.
yeah, and just getting their reactions to it, to see what that would be like. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously I've given a couple, some of the bigger ones like Matt Tybee and stuff, but I've also given some smaller people, just things people I know,
Yeah.
who've written on certain things and given it to them and given them questions to answer on it, and I've explained the significance of Substack to them. And I don't want to release too much information, but I've got a former student who
Yeah.
writes for Substack now, and he and I know who each other is, and I'm looking to recruit another one here coming up pretty soon.
That is awesome.
So I've actually kind of seeding Substack with my my own students and stuff. I'm brilliant kids, really smart kids, have a lot to say. And what I'm hoping is that as they get out there, and I'm doing my best to introduce them to people and stuff, that they don't have to go the hard way. I'm 45 years old, and I'm just now getting into this, but
Yeah.
I'm really hoping they can meet some people who are good critics and good editors who can get behind them and help mold them into being really sophisticated writers early on, where they don't have to kind of work through it like, I think some of us had to
Right,
do.
right.
Yeah, it's the opportunity to. It reminds me of when I was in school, and like if you, for example, I went to school for music originally, and ended up switching to history. But the joke was always, if you graduate from school with a music degree, it's probably because you suck, because no one wanted to pick you up and just start working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Substack is almost like that jazz club where it's like, oh, you want to play? All right, go get on the goddamn drums. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
up you get. And the essays that I gave out today, it's I'm talking to the student, and she's asking me these questions, and she asked me what I read over the summer, and I share the couple of things that I shared, and then I'm like, she's smarter and a little more intelligent, and I'm like, your parents get into this stuff? And she's like, yeah, my dad and I have conversations like this all the time, and I'm like, make sure to tell your dad about it, and I can't wait to hear that if maybe her dad reads Substack also. Like, how cool would that, and then it becomes like a community thing. It becomes a family thing. Like, hey guys,
Yeah.
we're all getting into this the creepy weird record
Right.
shop that Alex
No,
and I
yeah,
have
it's
joked about.
interesting. So a lot of my coworkers actually listen to this podcast, and they're a lot younger. They're in their 20s, and they also read Substack. And um, one of them, unbeknownst to me, like I did not know he even reads Substack, or I knew he shared similar viewpoints on things, and we've had conversations. He walks up to me one day in the middle of like the afternoon. He goes, "Hey man, check this article. It's really cool." And he shows me an article by John Carter, and I'm like, "Ha, I know that guy." I'm like,
I know
I
that
was
guy.
honestly, as he was telling me, I was chatting with him on Telegram, and I was like, that's so funny. Like, I'm like, wow, this shit is getting out there to people completely unconnected to our group, So there is
Yeah.
eyes on. I mean, like, I know you've got like 200, 300 comments on yours, and I get like 50, 60 sometimes. I'm like, who the fuck are these people? I love you all, readers and listeners, by the way, even though I don't know you. Um, One exciting thing, well, actually, you said something really interesting just now, Fisto, maybe as an aside. Um, I went to school, I graduated high school in 2002, right, which is the year of
Hmm.
right after, when did 9/11 happen? 2002 or 2000, 2001,
2001,
right? Yeah,
2001.
so I graduated,
Yeah, I was a
that
freshman
was
in
my senior
college.
year of high school. So
Or wait, no, no, I was a sophomore by then. Never mind. All right,
So
sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was a senior in high school. It happened at the beginning of my senior year, and then I graduated that following year in 2002, and my entire education, pre-college education, consisted solely of social studies, and it felt like there was no history, as it really did feel like that whole end of history idea where everything we learned about was in the past and nothing was happening right now, and you're right. Now it feels that there is history happening, that there is something going on. And it has to be exciting for you guys to be able to teach social studies and history and contextualize it, where teachers from our generation, when we were in school, did not really have that opportunity because it was the boring 90s or the boring early aughts, right? And it must be very interesting for students to experience the world today compared to when we were going through school. Do you guys feel like that at all?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Today, so the thing I did today was one of my subscribers was kind enough to buy me the set of The Course of Empire, the Thomas Cole paintings, and I
Mhm.
set them up in my room as like a art gallery. And I had the kids, hey, take some notes, look at the things, and then tell me, where do you think the United States is in this process, and tell me why you think this. And it was really just kind of a warm up kind of thing, like to get them thinking about it. We're going to do like an age of exploration thing and like look at all the different cultures and get into like proper geography over the second semester. But I wanted this as kind of a, out there sort of, hey guys, use your brains a little bit. Welcome back to class. Let's do something weird. And I got on to have several kids brought up some of the things that have been happening in the news, like the stuff around Greenland and the stuff around the Panama Canal and like all the things that are out there in the news. And what you said, yeah, I've gotten to do that. And it's really, really kind of stinking cool. One of my classes today, the really high level classes, I started talking to them about the philosophical, the history idea that, hey, you really don't know what's happening in the middle of the century, in a century until the middle of the century. And I told them about, the revolutions of 1848, the end of World War II. And then I was like, guys, in 20 years, you're going to be in the middle of the 21st century. Mark me, your crazy bald social studies teacher will have called it. You're going to find out what's going on. Trust me, you're going to find out what's finally going on. It had a more than a few, kind of perked their ears up and went, holy shit, dude. Yeah, guys, this is what I'm trying to tell you. You can see where this stuff is going. You could be
Right,
wizards,
right. That's pretty
basically.
cool. Do
Yeah,
you agree with
100%.
that, librarian?
One of yeah, one of the things I like to point out to the kids, um, history, things changing and stuff it can look very, very solidly like things are going in a certain direction, that every development is pointing towards a defined end. Then, very quickly, in historical terms, that just gets completely upended.
Yeah.
In 1991, and so I graduated high school in 1997. So I experienced the 90s a little bit older, I think, than you two guys. But
Yeah.
I was there for it. I remember in 1990s, there was this triumphalism around liberalism. It's Francis Fukuyama, end of history. Liberal democracy is the way to go. All that's left is for the rest of the dominoes to fall. Yeah, you've got these guys over in the Middle East who are Muslim, but that's going to end. It's going to, once they get American prosperity, it'll all fall by the wayside. And what you don't notice at the time, and what I talk about with the kids, is you don't get that liberalism is an ideology. It's not humanity's default. It's something that has to be consciously cultivated and spread and all those things. And it's a militant ideology. It's the ideology of manifest destiny. It's the ideology of American conquest and global empire. And in 1991, it looked like that was the future. And we've
Yeah.
all lived long enough now to see that confident prediction unraveling in real time.
I mean,
Um,
I
Yeah.
and
go ahead.
and there's all kinds of reasons. And one of the so I teach government, and all through government class I teach, here's the three branches of government and federalism and all that stuff like that. The very last thing I teach, I have a like 2 week long PowerPoint of liberal political ideologies. And I go into everything that isn't liberalism. I start from the left and I work my way over to the right. And I tell the kids, like, I'm giving you a broad spectrum of possibilities that the future might offer.
Hmm.
Not saying liberalism is going to disappear necessarily in your lifetime, but there's going to be a lot more than there was. Things are emerging in parts of Europe, Putin, stuff like that, where you just confidently predict the American way of life is just going to keep going forever and steamroll everybody, and we're on top of the world.
Right.
And I think growing up in the 90s, and maybe you remember this too, there's a confidence to it. But I also remember the 90s as being a very paranoid time. Paranoia was this undercurrent that flowed through culture. There was this unease. Everybody, the Cold War is over, and people are saying, well, why do we still have this giant government and this giant military industrial complex and all these things? The enemy's gone. Why are we talking about a new world order where America's policing planet Earth? What is all this? That's where you get all the militia movements and Ruby Ridge and Waco and all these
Right.
other things.
Hmm.
It was a
I'm thinking of
I
paranoid.
was I was
X-Files.
just about to say the X Files.
Yeah. If there's a
Yeah.
show that epitomizes the 90s, it's not My So-Called Life. It's the
Absolutely.
X-Files. It
Yeah.
really is.
And
And it wasn't a show that really even dealt with popular culture at all, but just that feeling that had that undercurrent of menace in daily life. Probably the creepiest episode of the X-Files, if you remember this one where the guys working at the corporation and the people are secretly bugs, and when the bug
Yeah.
boss bites people, they become zombies. That was insanely
Right.
creepy, and it kind of had this like dehumanizing neoliberalism sort of vibe to it that was really ahead of its time. Of
Hmm.
course, so what I have my students watch when we talk about the 90s when I used to teach American history was Jose Chung's From Outer
I've
Space.
never even heard of that.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. It's got it's not a typical episode. It's one of the Monster of the Week ones, but it's not even like that. It's got Charles Nelson Riley, who's playing like this John Keel style writer, and he's interviewing Scully about this recent case they worked on, where it's hard to even describe. There's just like these layers of paranoia to it. These kids get abducted by aliens, except they're not really aliens. They're Air Force pilots dressed like aliens, but they in turn are abducted by what are possibly actual aliens. And by the end, no one knows what's real. It's like this crazy, like all your notions of what's actually happening are stripped away. It's a brilliant
Right.
episode.
You know what's interesting? I've always thought
Hmm.
about X-Files because X-Files died with 9/11. There's something about
Yeah.
there's something about 9/11 that completely um, kind of neutered that. Do you guys remember the spin-off X-Files show Millennium? That was
Yeah.
very
Where
Yeah.
they put Millennium, but also the
the
Lone
Lone
Gunman,
Gunman, yeah.
Yeah, the
where
lone
they
gunman.
had
Yeah.
episode, crazily enough, where somebody crashed a plane into a building as a
Those
terrorist
guys were
attack.
the original shit
Yeah.
posters, man. They were the
Yeah.
proto Reddit crowd.
The original, yeah,
Yeah.
proto
Yeah.
4chan.
So on
I think sorry, I just wanted to something Librarian said about the confidence of the 90s. I'm trying to think of my own self. I think I really do understand what you mean because the confidence was in the fact that I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. I didn't have to worry about
Yeah.
any of that history stuff.
Yeah.
History was something you learned about that happened in the past. It wasn't something that was going to happen to you or be
Yeah.
something that you need to worry about. So I just never thought of it. And I think that underlying paranoia, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and my dad was a lifetime General Motors man. And I think of the 90s where there was this undercurrent of things, communism's gone, the Soviet Union's gone, everything's great. Why am I worried about my dad losing his job?
Yeah.
Because it's getting shipped to hold on. But I mean, I was only 15. I didn't know shit, but there's this sense of
the dread, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the word? There's a cognitive dissonance. America's
Yeah.
the greatest country in the world. Why am I worried about getting, losing everything?
And I think why X-Files went away right at that time kind of goes to the inverse of that, where people, there's undercurrent of paranoia and menace and these threats pervading society. There's this danger in our midst that we can't see. And then it actually physically manifests itself.
Yeah.
Turns out you weren't paranoid enough. There's people that were living in our midst that hijacked these planes, that destroyed our building. And the way that just like flipped the American story. Here we're telling ourselves that all these people desperately want to live like us. And then these people who lived among us, had access to everything our lifestyle could offer, betrayed and murdered us and took out one of the greatest achievements of American economics, the World Trade Center. And it was just sort of shocking in terms of like, how could you reject us like that?
right, right. No, for sure.
And the war on terror in a lot of ways was premised on this whole idea, you know, there's just some kind of error here. Once they figure out we're awesome, they'll want to be like us
Not all
again. All
Muslims.
we got to do is go over there and just put some freedom into them, and they'll
Mm.
love us and want to be part of us, and it'll be that. All they need is
There's only like
democracy.
5 of them that are really
And the
bad.
whole world
Yeah.
seemed to agree.
Yeah.
The whole
Yeah,
world seemed
and
to agree. Everybody was on our side at
yeah,
that point.
it was this moment where we were
Mm.
gonna just fix the world, and ended up happening was, uh, they fixed us. They
Yeah.
proved more resilient in their desire to live the way they wanted to live than we were to impose our life on them, which since World War II, we've consistently been unable to do. Like, as liberalism is a militant ideology, it perpetuates itself by imposing itself on new peoples. We've lost the power to do that.
Right. All right.
We can't impose liberalism on anybody
Right.
anymore.
No.
You know,
It's getting to the point now where states that have become liberal are deliberalizing. You're looking at places like Hungary and stuff,
Mhm.
consciously rejecting major elements of liberalism.
Mhm.
We're defending the liberal world order in Ukraine, falling back trench by trench doing it. It doesn't look well
and
for you.
there's alternative
And
models.
so
There's
I think,
alternative examples of a
yes,
successful superpowers like China that are showing us that, look, these guys can have all the stuff you have, but they're in a separate, completely different model. And
yeah,
their people are just as happy. You could, for a long time, maybe in the last decade, argue and consistently put out the idea that all the Chinese are living horrible, oppressed, miserable lives, and it's all the
Yeah.
Potemkin, what is it, Potemkin village, that we're seeing. But now that the Chinese are, everywhere, and if you spend any time traveling around the world, you're going to run into Chinese tourists. They're not oppressed North Koreans living in a horrible place. They're actually a wealthy people that have a very high standard of living, maybe in some ways not comparable to the United States, but in other ways quite comparable, if not better than the United States. And it does cause like a cognitive dissonance. I mean, if you guys remember when Tucker Carlson went to Moscow recently, and he showed the supermarket and all that stuff, which is something that all of us that are European and have lived in Europe and been to Eastern Europe could have told you, that like, no, dude, they're not living like it's 1944 over there, okay?
Yeah, it seems to me like
Yeah.
Chinese folks, they're measuring your office for curtains.
Right, right.
Like, yeah, they're not on the
Well,
back heel.
I had a realization, and it was a shocking in-person realization a few years ago. I was living in Japan with my wife, and my younger brother, got married to his long-term girlfriend, and of course we flew out back to California for his wedding. And the cheapest flight that we could find and the fastest, like, it was kind of a quick decision, and we messed up the planning, so we had to get a flight real quick, was a Chinese airline. It was an Air China flight. And I'm sitting on the airplane, and it's run by, Chinese flight attendants and everything. And what struck me, and we actually had a layover in Beijing. What struck me was the insane level of arrogance and confidence that the Chinese nationals had. Like, these guys, the airline felt like so professional, and so they had this level of arrogance towards the non, like, Chinese passengers that were not Chinese or not like European whites, basically. That was almost shocking to me, to where I was like, wow, these guys are probably acting in the same way Americans used to act 40 years ago when we were on top of the world. And it was
Yeah.
when I had that
Yeah.
realization, I was like, these guys are on the ascent. And this had to be like 2016, 17. So it wasn't even in the whole China big deal issue wasn't even really up there yet in public knowledge. And it stuck by me. I remember having that thought, and I remember vocalizing it to my wife, and she's like, yeah, you're right. They're so self-assured, and arrogant is probably the wrong word, but like so, um, you know, yeah,
Self-assured. Yeah,
self-assured,
just
right?
just
Yeah.
self-assured. Just
I
self-assured.
do. Well, so for listeners at home, we're going to talk a lot about education in this episode because we got two educators here, and I think that, well, and I think that the topic of education is a critical element, and I want to tie it in with a little bit to one of Librarian's recent essays. I believe is your penultimate essay, right? Which was the piece on the whole Vivek thing. Okay. And
Yes,
you wrote a
yes.
piece on Vivek Ramaswamy is correct, or I believe that's what the title is, right?
He's right.
He was
Yes,
right,
he's right.
right? Which, you're being
Yeah.
sarcastic on my read of it, right?
Yeah.
But for people not familiar with it, Vivek Ramaswamy, he went on this Twitter or X rant about how, Americans are stupid and we don't work 80 and 90 hours a day, and we watch Saved by the Bell and Boy Meets World, and we love our prom queens and our football. And meanwhile, the Bugman children sit there and study for 90 hours a day and become, tech lords, and they're going to own us, right? Um, and this
Yeah.
is something that I've been thinking a lot about. I mean, I'm a devotee, a heavy reader of Byung-Chul Han's work, and he talks a lot about this kind of issue of like what we
Burnout
Burnout
Society, that
Society,
guy.
yes, Burnout Society, and a few other ones. His Via Contemplativa, and just a lot of philosophy, Heideggerian philosophy from a Catholic perspective, and Vivek's kind of little rant and the back and forth between everybody, you know, really fits very much so in that whole vein of thought. And if you pay attention to media and kind of corporate America and our tech bro sort of mentality, there is a turn towards that kind of bugman, work ethic. And there's an obsession with, you know, optimization, right? And this is something that I have been for as long as I've been writing back on WordPress days and on Substack. That I'm against that. I'm a fan of the contemplative amateur. But if you scroll through Instagram or TikTok or anything, you're going to see ad after ad about gamify your life. Turn your life into a role playing game, and it's going to tell you when to make your bed, and when to do this, and when to do this, and when to read this book, how to read 40 books a month, and all this stuff so you can become a great conversation. Just this kind of gamification and obsession with optimization, which goes against I think, the aristocratic spirit of liberal arts and liberal education. And that's terrifying to me because I don't want to live in a world of corporate striver cog machines. Okay. I think the worst thing that's happened to the educational system is that it's become a credentialing system for getting a job instead of what it really should be is about making a good human, making an intuitive, uh, inquisitive human that loves art for art's sake, literature for literature's sake, and spirituality for spirituality's sake, or well, for their own soul's sake. But what do you guys think about that kind of idea as educators?
Well, I'll let
Well,
the
for my
elder.
part,
Yeah, please, please.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go first.
I was just gonna say I'd like the elder to speak first, honestly.
If you go back to the foundations of progressive education, which essentially is American
Yeah.
education, if you teach at a public school, if you teach at vast majority of private schools, you are getting progressive education. And the godfather of progressive education is John Dewey. And John Dewey, back in Democracy and Education, basically outlined what he thought education should be. And he said, well, you got these people, they're learning the classics and stuff like that. That's no good anymore because our world is changing so fast that there is no timeless wisdom. There's just individuals living in the societies they live in. And the idea should be to create these people who are just kind of flexible and useful. The sort of individual who can be plugged into an economy in some kind of useful role where he's doing good for society as kind of an instrument of society. And it's a very impoverished view of humanity. It's a very liberal view of humanity, not liberal in the classical sense, but liberal in the sense that John Dewey would have understood it. Progressive, the idea that uh, the state and all of its systems can be harnessed to the positive ends of human development, that you can create a society of people who are basically consumers, fungible economic units. Now, to be fair to John Dewey, he himself was a cultured man. And like a lot of people who advance philosophy, new philosophies, a lot of them just kind of assume things will keep going like they were when they were kids, even though they're introducing all these innovations. Very few people have the foresight to just see the implications of what they're going for. And Dewey lived a very long time, and he argued with nobody understood what he was going for, but we live with that legacy. Alongside that, Dewey got kind of criticized as being a little bit hippy dippy. Kids learn what they want, follow your truth, that kind of thing. And so alongside that is this other flip side of progressivism where an education consists in producing people who are economically useful. How do you know somebody's educated? Well, they've checked the following boxes, they're employable, boom. And those two things kind of flow together in Vivek Ramaswamy's critique. He basically sees American education as mediocre because, in his view, it's not producing people who are profitable to overlords. And if it was doing its job, it would be churning out, people that wouldn't have to be replaced by Indians, in his view. The idea of working for 80 hours a week in some repetitive task is simply anti-human.
Right. It's absurd.
And I don't think, yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, you can maintain that level of activity and for very short periods of time on something that's profoundly important, in the middle of combat, or you're just writing a book or something, you just got to finish something like that. But that's not something you can do day to day for any extended period of time. You want to. And my basic critique of Ramaswamy was he is correct. I wasn't really being sarcastic. I meant it. He was right, just not in the sense that he thought. American education does encourage mediocrity. It's all about mediocrity. It is designed by mediocre people to produce mediocre people. We're not in the industrial age anymore. We don't need workers who can read blueprints, or we're not trying to produce them. We're trying to produce consumers. We're trying to produce dumbed down people who will buy stuff, and that's basically what they're that's your new role economy. And so yeah, we are producing those people. And the only way you can get somebody to work 80 hours a week is to impoverish them and then tell them, hey, you can have all these wonderful things if you work 80 hours a week. That's about it. Um, Progressive education is about getting what you want. Classical education is about wanting better
Right.
things.
Yeah.
And until we get back to that, we will remain mediocre. And that's really, what does he know about American society for having grown up here? Say about,
Right.
and he's like, you should be more like Screech. Like the Zach on the show wasn't dumb. They were all in college. Like, I don't know why he thinks that. Like, but anyway, so that's my take.
Right. What do you think, Fisto?
Um, I keep thinking of the kids that I okay, so I teach freshmen exclusively, and one of the big things that I have to do in the first few months is kick them in the ass because they come from eighth grade where the schools here, you know, middle school and elementary school are just they're not producing quality
Just
people. They're
daycares.
not produced. Yeah, they're making the kinds of people that Librarian just described, working as intended, but we want better things, not what we want, right? Not whatever we want. And when they get to me, it's like, all right, let's go. Like I'm basically hitting rocks with a sledgehammer, for like the first few months. But then they start to get it. I see the I see the psyche, I see their mind begin to open, and I begin to have them see what the hell it is I've been so excited about for the past 2 to 3 months, 4 months. And I see them begin to make intuitive leaps. I see them begin to make imaginary leaps. I see them to begin getting legitimately creative. The best answer I got on my midterm was somebody recognizing they literally described the journey from being a boring cog in the machine to being a human agent of divine chaos. That is what they described in their essay. And I guess my thing is that where Vivek is wrong is that you're going to have this whole, whatever the educational system does to us to beat curiosity out of kids, it doesn't work because you can find people like me who will dig the curiosity out of people. I'm not going to get it out of everyone because it may not have really been there in the first place. I don't know. Or maybe I wasn't the right one to dig it out of certain
Right.
people. But that latent divine curiosity will be in there. And if there are people out there who can dig it out, they're going to dig it out and fuck it all up. And in that case, Vivek is going to find himself with a whole hell of a lot of problems because there's going to be a bunch of people out there who are going, this isn't the life I want. I mean, look at some of the debate that there was on Substack about millennials and boomers and like that little bit of a generational kind of slap fight. Millennials are 40. I mean, I was talking to some of the Zoomers in my class today. I'm like, I want you guys to have an amazing life. I want you guys to build something cool, to get something cool. I'm a millennial. Learn from my mistakes. Learn from the things that I did not do correctly. Because, look, clock's ticking. I'm getting old. I don't have the greatest health. I don't have a lot of time on this world. If I get at least 4 or 5 of you guys to get out there and build the Roman Empire, then I will have considered my life well lived. And they respond to this. They nod. They're like, hell yeah, let's go.
Right.
They actually when they have people telling them that they can do great things and that they can build things that'll be remembered, they respond to it. So I have to believe that despite the education system's best efforts, there are people out there who are like, no. I'm meant for more. I'm meant for better things. I'm meant for something
So how do you
worthwhile.
answer as teachers? How do you answer this question from a student? And I know this because I've heard it from, my peers when I was in high school. Oh man, like, Why do I gotta learn this gay Shakespeare stuff? Because I'm gonna go be a nurse. I'm going to nursing school right after, and I'm gonna make like six figures nursing. So why do I have to sit here and fucking study Midsummer's Night Dream about dudes being turned into donkeys and shit? It's just stupid. Why don't you just teach me how to do like finance or, coding or something like that? Why are you guys wasting my time with all this history and literature and all this crap?
Well, living in a rural town like I do, it's a little bit of a different pitch. Um, I mean, the basic pitch is just, well, listen, do you want to live your own life and accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, or do you want somebody else to lead you by the nose and point you in the direction they want you to go? It's really at the end of the day, like, do you want to have some agency or not?
Right.
And for the specifics, like for the fellas, I'll be like, guys, do you want to grow up to be men? Do you want to be men who run their lives and run their families and run their households? Ladies, do you want to have a family someday? Do you want to have kids someday? Do you want to raise kids that you can be proud of? You need to learn this stuff. You need to open your mind and engage with these things. You need to jump in and take a look at some of the things that I'm showing you. Put your phone down, turn it off, put it away, and check out Edward Gibbon. Here you go. Like, check out something that's better than the slop you get on TikTok
Right.
every
Because,
day.
well, in Vivek's world, studying Shakespeare is a waste of time. You know, I mean, he didn't say it as much, but the implication, the underlining there is that we're wasting our time even, having conversations about books and entertainment.
You know, it's so
Well,
funny to
there's
see.
a.
Sorry. Go ahead, and then I'll
Oh
rant a
no, go
little bit.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, just it's so ridiculous to me. It's funny to me as a millennial because, like, guys, we grew up watching one of the greatest Shakespeare actors ever play the captain of the Starship Enterprise. You want to tell me that Shakespeare's useless? I want to be like Captain Picard. Fuck you. Like, he knows all that stuff. It's like we have all these heroes that just show that no, this is wrong.
Right.
This is not. This is not. Shakespeare's useless. Give me a freaking break. That guy rode the lightning. I love how Brad Kelly described him. That guy rode the lightning his whole career. That's
Right.
amazing.
Right.
So
You know?
there is one thing. I can understand the appeal of it. You'll hear people make this kind of argument, like when kids will say, "Why do I need Shakespeare?" And usually the normicon type will come out and say something like, "Well, if you learn Shakespeare, it'll improve your vocabulary and it'll have all these like positive benefits and make you able to communicate better and you get a better job and stuff like that." You'll hear people say Latin. Why do I need to study Latin? Well, there's studies that show that if you study Latin and you take the
Studies
SAT,
that
people who study
show.
Latin do better on the SAT and stuff.
Ugh.
I even if it was true, I stay away from those kinds of functional
I agree.
arguments. To me, it's just another layer of liberalism slapped on top. It's this idea that if you can't instrumentalize knowledge, it's not worth having. Vivek Ramaswamy, as I understand, somebody commented on my piece that, well, didn't you know he plays tennis and he plays piano or something like that? And I responded back, that's how you get into college. You have to check those boxes.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never seen him comment meaningfully on anything to do with music or sports. It's instrumentalized. If you were to sit down with him, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but if you were to sit down with him, he'd probably say, "Oh, absolutely, Shakespeare is important. You got to have a good vocabulary to succeed in business." That's kind of the response
Right.
he
It's a
gets.
check in the box.
It's an
It is
impoverished
an
view.
improvised review. Misses
Yeah,
the whole spiritual element of the
yeah,
work and the essence of Western civilization. And
yeah.
so yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that's really, when the kid comes to me, and it'll be different for different people. Um, I like to think that anybody can learn these things. I like to tell myself that. But I know that not everybody wants to learn these things or can learn
Right.
these things. There are things appropriate for the many and things appropriate for few. And I don't knock anybody for saying, I want to be a mechanic. I don't understand these things. I can't find it within me to put the work
Yeah.
into any kind of deep analysis of literature and stuff like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If that's really what you want out of life after being exposed to these things, you know what? The world needs people like that.
Right.
Not everybody is cut out for that sort of thing. But for those who can, I have nothing but withering contempt. I had a kid the other day say something like that. He's like, why do I need to learn how to read all these books or something to that effect?" And I said, "Books are useless." And I said, "Well, a laptop is useless to a squirrel, but that's not because the laptop's bad. It's because the squirrel has the size of a peanut."
That's a good one. That's a
Because
good
like,
line.
yeah, the kid, kids will tell me proudly. They'll look at me and say, "I don't read." And I tell them, one day you won't have to tell people that. They'll just know from talking to you. Like some 400-pound guy on a
Oof.
couch. "I don't really exercise." Like,
Yeah,
what
no
the hell do
shit.
you say? Like, it'll just be
Right.
obvious. Um, there's this element of yourself that's not functional, that's not utilitarian, that's not for someone else to make use of. Um, and what's really sad is you get a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy, and he's at the top of the heap for everything. And okay, you got all the power in the world. You're smart. You did this 80-hour a week grind. What are you doing with it, other than just trying to make more money?
Right.
That's like literally the only thing. You made millions of dollars. Quit and go study or learn something, or become you can do whatever you want, and want to do is what you're currently
Right.
doing.
It's how in
It's
my
just
recent post about what's his name, Medici, Il Magnifico. I talked about
yeah,
Lorenzo.
Lorenzo
Yeah,
Medici. Yeah, yeah,
how he devoted his life. He had all this money
Yeah.
because Medici
yeah.
family was a great banking family in Florence, and I highly recommend his biography. It's one of the best biographies I've read. And he had all this money. These guys were basically the lords of the city. And what did he do with it? He built gardens so he could have philosophers and artists hang out with him so he could have conversation, you know? And he sponsored, I believe, um, if I remember correctly, he had Michelangelo live with him for 4 years when he was a teenager. He basically went up to his dad's like, "Hey, Michelangelo lives with me now. I'm going to bring all these instructors, these other sculptors, and they're going to teach him. They're going to sponsor him, and he's going to build shit for me." You know what I mean? And
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that you're talking about a man who himself was a talented
right,
poet, musician, statesman, all those things. He walked the walk in terms of embracing culture, but he realized that he was a secondary talent in all those aspects. And what he could offer culture was not his own personal contribution, but patronage.
right,
He was someone who could spot talent and who could cultivate talent.
right.
And that's something that I don't think gets recognized enough as a true artistic skill. We see the guy who paints, we see the guy who sculpts, but those guys don't just come out of nowhere. They can't just do that stuff without funding and support and an infrastructure behind them. And the guys who
Yeah.
develop that are just as talented as any
And
architect. And
Yeah.
that's something we very much
right.
lack, especially
I like
along
And
the
that
right.
was that was
I
the
like I
point. That
like
was
the
the point
idea.
of my little essay, which was, you
Yeah, it
can
was
sit
great.
there
Yeah.
and complain about, well, how come we don't have these statues anymore? Are you gonna fucking pay for them? You won't even toss $5
Yeah.
for a podcast or a Kindle book, and here you want somebody to
Yeah.
devote their life to sculpting marble with their bare hands.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is gonna pay for it? Excuse my language, right? But that stuff's not cheap, right? Um, and if
Yeah.
you're not gonna, and that's we look at our oligarchs, our Bezos and stuff, and what are they doing? Where's the monuments? Where's the great buildings they're leaving behind? Where's the town
You want
squares,
to
you know?
you want to talk about Bezos. You're talking about a guy who bought the rights to like some small part of Lord of the Rings and spends on each episode of this show that he came up with the equivalent of the entire budget of the first Matrix movie per episode. And it's just universally
Yeah, it's a
reviled.
turd.
It looks cheap. There's serious speculation. The scripts are written by AI. None of the characters make sense. It's just an incoherent, absolute mess. More people watch YouTube guys dunk on it. Yakubi Ape had a great article about those guys. Watch YouTube guys dunk on the show than watch the actual show. Jeff Bezos could do anything he wanted on Earth with his money, and he decided to just completely bend over, deep pants, and just nail Lord of the Rings. And I do
You
not.
know,
I mean, he's the
Right,
anti-Medici.
right.
He's the exact opposite of
Anti-Medici.
And
what.
he has more
It's
money.
it's it's
He
so
has more
funny.
money than the
Yeah.
Medici could have ever imagined. He has more money and
Yeah.
more power and more
Yeah.
reach than those guys could have dreamed of.
It blows my mind for a minute that Lord of the Ring, the new Lord of the Rings stuff is so bad
Yeah.
that The Room is better than it by simply virtue of actually being made by a human with his own hands.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
like that. That's how bad
yeah.
this AI. That's how bad it is. The
And you
Room
can
is like,
see, yeah,
oh, superior film.
you can see exactly why. 25 years ago, you had Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson is like an early Gen X guy. So he's growing up in a world where you still had some hint of that cultural connection to the past. He grew up in a world where movies were made by guys who still studied liberal arts in school, guys who had a connection to that old world. So he was still able to kind of manage it. And the movies he made are awesome. They're great stuff. But the new crowd are completely divorced from any kind of traditional culture, from their own background, nothing. And the only thing they can put on film or in a book or in a song is downtown Los Angeles. That's it. It's the only thing they know, the only thing they can talk about. You can put a sword in its hand, but that's
And they're
not
not
it.
very good at even downtown Los Angeles. Coming from
No,
downtown Los Angeles myself, they can't capture downtown Los Angeles in the way somebody like, even Quentin Tarantino, who's a hack himself.
okay. When I say downtown
You mean
Los
the
Angeles, I'm
population?
talking
Yeah, I know
about
the ideas. Yeah,
yeah. I'm talking about a specific subset of Hollywood writers who live in even within Los Angeles. They live in
right.
their
Their
own
own
little
little
bubble.
cave.
One of the best movies I ever saw. I've never been to Los Angeles. But one of the best movies I ever saw that just showed a whole different side of Los Angeles was the very, very wonderful Michael Mann Collateral.
Right.
If you've never seen that, if you've never seen Michael Mann's Collateral, please take a break, go watch that movie. It is absolutely phenomenal. And if people say Los Angeles is filmed out or whatever like that, Collateral just shows like a whole different side of it. It's
I
brilliant.
love Michael Mann movies. I think his Manhunter is a fantastic movie.
Manhunter
Yeah.
was good, yeah.
So I'm gonna kind of move us along
But
because we are short on time today. Um, I have another question for you guys, and this one is also about education. And I'm gonna refer to myself in this one because I was in a way I was that kid, right? I was that boy, right? I was that boy that was unfortunately too smart early on. Uh, I never had to study. I never paid attention in class because I was too busy reading, and then I would just ace the test, get a great good grade, and all my teachers loved me, but they knew I wasn't going to do any homework, and I just kept on moving on and on until I hit a wall. I hit the wall in late high school, college, where I realized that the system was not built for me. In a way, I think I would have thrived in a classical 19th century college environment, and maybe the early 20th century, like Cambridge kind of situation where you get to go and actually like challenge yourself and achieve. But I was stuck in a very feminized, hostile to me kind of environment. And I said, fuck it, joined the military instead, dropped out of college, joined the military. And, academia is shut out to guys like that. It's hostile to guys that want to learn and want to be, intellectuals. And, you know, it's almost impossible, I think, for a young man, specifically a young white male, to really embrace academia in this day and age because the obstacles, the hurdles for him are just, monumental. I remember sitting in a college class on it was a literature class, and I remember this is the moment I decided to drop out of college. I was sitting there, and there was some, I don't know, 50, 60-year-old hag white lady, with leathery skin, and she had like a dreadlocks, and she looked like the fucking Predator. And she went on this rant about how evil men are and how they're all rapists and stuff. And this is like in early 2000s. It wasn't even in the woke era. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm struggling to pay for this place. I'm like eating top ramen, trying to make rent, working full time and going here. what am I doing here? I'm going to go become a college professor because I had this strange notion I was going to teach, I was going to teach English or something like that, And I was like, I'm going to be broke. Nobody's going to ever hire me. These people are not going to ever hire me to do anything. And I'm going to be starving for the rest of my life. And my other thought was like, there's a war going on, and I want to be part of it. I'm sitting here learning about Lord Byron going off to war, and here I am, like
Yeah.
listening to this hag, this monstrosity telling me that I'm a rapist. So I was like, fuck this, I'm done. I remember like I just walked out. I just like I'm done with this. I'm never going back, and I just dropped out. But yeah, how do you get these young men to embrace academia, who are so disenchanted with, you know, you think of academia and you think of like, the secret history or this, exciting kind of like, tweed intellectual conversation. And you get to these colleges and they're just completely idiotic and run by blue haired morons. And how do you, what do you do? What do you tell those guys?
Hmm.
Well, okay. So go
I'm
ahead.
thinking, man.
I
I'm
went
thinking.
first last time.
Thinking. Nah, right. Well, it's different where I'm at only because again I live in a rural town and I'm thinking of all the young men that I've taught and most of them already have a plan figured out and it doesn't involve academia. Like I've got the one kid where he's going to take over his dad's roofing business. I've got another guy who's going to get into construction. I have another guy who is going to become an EMT. He's one of my favorites. This kid showed up. He's a senior and he's in like my homeroom thing that we've got. He's a senior and he just showed up to my town this year. And he comes in and he's like, "Hey, the guy's he's clearly put together. Like this is clearly a mature young adult man." And he's like, "Hey, Mr. So and so, I want to, talk about EMT and this and that." I'm like, "I know exactly who you need to speak with. Let's go." I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him down to our guy that handles EMT and firefighting and all that stuff. I said, "You need to talk to this man right here." Guy brought him in. I check in with the dude 6 months later, and the EMT guy is like, "Thank you so much for walking that dude down. He is incredible. He's going to do a great job. But like, he's gonna be the kind of person that you want to see out in the community. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's just so thrilled.
Yeah.
And I think for me, at least to try to answer your question, it's it's listening to the students. It's getting to know the student, getting to know what it is that they want to do to make an impact. What is the better thing that they want, and then making sure I direct them in the correct direction, whether it's academia, college, or EMT or construction. And I think part of it is I have a reputation among the students of being a really smart guy. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the world by any stretch of the imagination, right? But to a high school student, I look pretty bright. Okay. I look pretty clever. And I think it goes a long way when I tell them, hey, I want to be an EMT. That sounds awesome. You can still be incredibly smart. You can still be well read. You can still be the well rounded, full individual that I know you are. But the thing you're going to go do, yes, do that by all means. And when they hear it from a guy like me, it's kind of like, okay, uh, it's the biggest thing that I can give to kids like this is just encouragement to go live the life that they feel like they should be
Right.
doing. Go live the life that you feel like you should be living, whether it's going to college or not. I don't care. I got a couple of younger guys. 15-year-old boys are idiots, right? But they'll listen to you on occasion, and you can look at them and be like, you have the potential to be a man someday. You have the potential to be someone of consequence. If you're going to do that, whatever you end up doing, you need to start making those decisions right now. You need to start making those habits and making those things and get on the grind so you can be the person you imagine that you are. And in my mind, it's just that's the best I can do is just wait for those opportunities to push them at the better
Right.
thing and not let them settle for bullshit,
Right. Well,
basically.
see, so okay, so I was listening to the latest episode of Art of Darkness, this the first year's episode, right? And the topic was Marshall
Yeah.
McLuhan, right? And you guys, he's the Canadian guy who came up with Media is the Message, and he wrote a bunch of very interesting books, mid-century and
Oh,
on media
right.
kind of media analysis. You listen to his biography, and this guy is from Manitoba, just bumfuck Canada, right? Like middle of nowhere, the prairie of Canada. And he was an exceptional student, and his teachers led him to, he got his bachelor's in Manitoba, and then he ended up going to Cambridge in England, and got his master's and his PhD from Cambridge and became a professor, and then he wrote all these novels. So he was a strict academia kind of guy. And he was friends with Ezra Pound and all sorts of stuff over the years. Now, um, the problem is, what do we do with those guys? Those high school kids, those early college kids that
Yeah.
are in a way locked out of academia because they might have a high school teacher like you who does open their minds and push them in the right direction, but then they get to college and it's a hostile environment for them, and if it was a hostile environment for me in 2002, it's definitely a hostile environment in this day and age for somebody like me. And you know how do we can't cede that ground, like how do we tell?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
my
librarian.
my take on it. So I've spent, I guess, what for most people would be a very long time in academia. I've probably attended college for about 14 years. I've taught college since 2008, in person, online, dual enrollment to high school kids, regular college, all kinds of stuff. I still teach online college classes to this day on top of my teaching job. And I hear a lot of criticisms like that, like, oh, I got the blue hair professor, and they're real, they exist and everything like that. But I think two things. One, the blue-haired activist types like that, they tend to be concentrated in certain areas, certain places you can find them. And if you really try, you know what you're looking for, you can avoid them. Way more insidious than that, I think, and I say this as very much a man of the right, is the neoliberal impetus that has now just invaded college campus. The kind of public school mentality has worked its way up,
Yeah.
and now there's this idea that every college degree has to come with employment or it's worthless. You'll hear people mocking, oh, this guy studied English, he's unemployable, as if that's the reason to do things. And I think a lot of people get seduced by that rhetoric. Chris Rufo, who I like, who does good work, he's down there at New College in Florida, and they're getting rid of all the woke stuff, which is fine, which is wonderful. But then you'll hear people around him say things like, "Oh, we're getting rid of these useless majors, and we're going to make sure people get jobs when they." It's like that's just you're just turning it into a trade
Right.
school. You're taking away what's
It's
actually
not that's
valuable
not the
about it.
point of
The
university.
way to reform academia, yeah, the way to reform academia is to maximize agency among academics. Um, and for their part, academics need to recognize that being in academia represents a sacrifice of years of your life, a sacrifice of financial security, a sacrifice of all kinds of things. I mean, back in the day, the early Oxford days, stuff like that. I mean, you read about these guys, they either lived in grinding poverty, like Tolkien did before he got rich and famous writing Lord of the Rings, or they were just bachelors who lived with their brother, like C.S. Lewis. It was understood that if you didn't have an independent income, you were going to suffer. Um, if somebody were to say, "Hey, librarian, here's $2 million, do whatever, $10 million, whatever, do whatever you want with your life," I would go back to I would go back to UGA, University of Georgia. I'd buy a house next to campus, and I would just spend the rest of my life taking classes there and be happy. Being in an environment like that, where it was the first time I'd ever been in a place where the teacher asked a question, and I put my hand up, but so did everyone else. I went to a horrible high school. Everybody's interested in this. Whoa, like Hebrew Bible, classical Greek. This is blowing my
Right.
mind. And the last thing I want to do is I don't. To me, and I understand the warnings and they make sense, but to me, I don't want to go like full academia incel. You know, like, oh, women are terrible guys, just stay away from them and stuff. Like, I don't want to go that way and be like, "God, college is nothing but these commie professors and just stay away from it. It's awful. It's not. There's a lot of great
Because that's
stuff there.
ceding the ground to
Um,
those people in a way, and
yeah,
that's
and that's the other thing too. Yeah, so for decades, I'm sure you heard this too. You know, you hear all these guys on Fox News, oh, these crazy lefty college professors, but that's okay because salt of the earth people are Republican and stuff. And now, great, now you're ruled by the people you thought were crazy 10 years
right,
ago.
right.
You know, that said, uh, there is definitely space for the autodidact. I
That's what I
think
kept
we live in
thinking.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We live in a world where where the best of academia and the best of self-study can be actualized by anybody, provided he has the right guidance.
yeah.
Okay, go to this college, take this class, but also supplement your reading with this, and this. There's real opportunity for better or worse. Academia has been shellacked, by Trump and everything like that. And there's going to be someone somewhere out of all these people who actually wants to take an honest look at this phenomenon. And there's going to be a field opening up where, like, right wing studies or something like that, where people actually go in and explore rightist philosophy. And there's opportunities for young guys to get in on that now. I'm too old. I don't think I'll ever be doing
Right.
something like that in an academic setting. But these guys who are 20 who are coming down the pike, I don't want to discourage
An
them.
entire
Looking
course on
at a
dark
guy like,
enlightenment and Mencius Moldbug that can be a college course, right?
yeah, hey, look at it. Look at a guy like Lorenzo. Look at a guy like Lorenzo de Medici and what he was able to accomplish. Lorenzo de Medici brings in Marsilio Ficino, has him translate Plato, has him translate the whole Hermetic corpus, writes an original series, Platonic theology. He's sponsoring people like that. He's got an academy around him. And when you think about that, think about a place like Columbia, South Carolina, Florence, Italy, when the Medici were there, was basically the same size. The pool of people that Lorenzo de Medici had to draw on, it was no greater than the people who live in the greater Columbia, South Carolina
Right.
area, or Savannah, or anything like, or any of that city, mid-sized city like that. Not even talking about a place like Atlanta, and definitely not a place like New York. You're talking about a city of like 80 to 100,000 people, and a town like, if you can accomplish that in the Renaissance, in the late Middle Ages, when all this was starting, you can accomplish it anywhere. They didn't have computers, they didn't have phones, they had parchment and paper and pens, and a guy with a
Correct.
commitment. And that's what I see happening. That kind of patron-driven fusion of academia and
Right.
autodidacticism.
And
Yeah.
that's what I think in a way that is uh, in a way my mission, okay? And that's why
Yeah.
I love having, Fisto on here as an educator, and I love having you on here. And I do come from more autodidact side of things because I did leave college and never followed up on it, which is kind of a thing that, you know, not the ideal situation I would have wanted, but I think I got a lot of education in other ways. Um, Tech schools and that kind of thing. But I think that's our goal, right? Our goal is to continue this culture and continue our Western civilization through the reenchantment and the rediscovery of the great works and move forward at the same time through a combination of formal education and also a community education through autodidactism. The internet is such a great tool, and I feel like one of the things is that it's completely underutilized in education.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's like it's been ignored by, uh, there've been attempts at, like the great courses online, for example, on Audible, you can download all of them. But man, like that kind of stuff can supplement, listening to the great courses on Audible can supplement almost any college bachelor's level, undergrad course, and they're fantastic, and especially when they're mixed with mixed media stuff like video and also PDFs that have syllabi and different references, and you can download instantly. We have at our fingertips all the knowledge of the world almost. I can instantly, pretty much open my Kindle right now and download every single noteworthy book with, several exceptions, some of the more rare stuff. And Lorenzo sent out his people to search Europe for books, for manuscripts, you know? And
Yeah.
here we are, we have so much more power than he ever had. Right now, sitting in front of me on my desk, I have a Kindle and I can just
Mhm.
anything I want, you know? And I think it's up to us. I think it's in a way our responsibility, and by us I mean me, you know, Fisto, and all the guys that are substacking and putting out all these ideas that we need to focus and bring this stuff to the younger generations, separate from the kind of staid, sclerotic systems that have been in place since maybe the 80s. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
one of the reasons the internet was never really embraced was because it was wild and it wasn't controlled, and that terrifies a public school teacher. What if they learn something they're not, it's the old propaganda about Wikipedia. Hey, anybody can say whatever they want on Wikipedia, you know, which not to say that it's good, but like that poisoned the internet, I think, for a lot of people. Oh, anybody can write something on the internet. And it's like, well, guys, anybody can write anything in a book too. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
slower. It's just slower.
The challenge of the internet is that the joy of the great thing about the internet is you can find anything there. The challenge
Hmm.
is you can find anything there.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
All the good stuff is buried under 15 sedimentary layers of pornography and ads and nonsense.
Right.
And it's easy to find stuff, easier to find crap. And what's missing is not the knowledge, it's there. What's missing is that spiritual desire for it. That's what has to be cultivated in
Right.
people. Um, all you need to do is click a button, and what the great things are there in front of you. So the problem isn't that the stuff isn't there; it's that nobody's pushing that button. Why aren't they
Yeah.
pushing
Nobody
that
wants to
button?
find
Because
it.
the porno button makes you happier.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. That's what I keep coming back to. You know, liberalism gives you the internet. You can have anything you want. But that point I was making before, you know, it's about wanting better things. Why should I sit here and read about Alexandre Dumas or something like that, as opposed to, you know, just hitting up the hub and, you know, doing that for an
The,
hour and stuff? Because this will make me feel good right now, whereas this other thing takes
the
work.
sludge,
And
how you
yeah,
put it
and
well, the
it's
sludge in your last essay.
yeah, and that's yeah, and that piece, you know, wasn't super popular because it was I got some good feedback on it. I'm happy about that, but um it didn't get quite the likes that a lot of my other pieces get because it was kind of challenging in that sense. You know, I was really throwing some stuff out there, and you know, that idea of sludge, that we just get this stuff pumped into our heads by society, and you got to just consciously choose to turn it off and, you know, wake up from it and stuff, that we're all being kind of sludged out by this deluge of information and flashing lights and ads, and you know,
Yeah.
it's just a it's a and I was kind of pushing back. I was like, you know, I started off like people are thinking I'm making fun of Cyrax again, but I'm actually saying we're all kind of Cyrax. You know, we're all being sludged out.
Surely
I'm
not
not, you
me.
know, pointing out what's
Surely
wrong with
not
him.
me. Yeah, that's what
Right.
people think. I no, I'm not the one. No, yeah, you
Except
Yeah.
for
are.
you.
None
You
of the
are. Yeah, you
listeners,
are.
none of the
Everybody is.
members of the Black Ibis Social Club.
Yeah,
No,
This
if
is
you
not
subscribe, if
sludge.
you're a paid subscriber to the Black Ibis,
yeah.
you
I mean,
you're not one of the
yeah,
people librarians talking about, because you have to be a
Yeah,
paid
this is
subscriber.
basically Lorenzo de Medici's garden in
yeah,
podcast form.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, that's interesting.
Yes.
You said something earlier, librarian, how if you had $2 million, you would move next to the University of Georgia and go to classes all day. And one of the sad things of adult life is that once you're done with your education, there's no more learning anymore. I mean, yes, you can read your own book, read books and, watch documentaries and that kind of stuff. But there isn't really an opportunity for adult learning, like symposiums and that type of thing.
Let me
That's missing in our
let
world.
let me throw something back at you real quick that you might find kind of, and Fisto might find this kind of interesting too, because I think he's in the same kind of environment. My first college teaching, well, actually my first teaching job in general, I taught college before I taught high school, was in this little small town college in middle Georgia. And it was a real rural area, presumably like kind of where Fisto teaches, is rural
Yeah.
area.
Yep.
And the main attraction of this college was it had a nursing program.
Mm.
And for rural working class girls, being a nurse is like the highest achievement you can
Right.
hope for. it's a steady job in a hospital. You're treated like a professional. It's like the most a working class girl can hope for. So this program was very oversubscribed. It was very, very competitive. You had to go to the school for 2 years before you could even apply to it. So I had like a lot of 18, 19-year olds in my world history class getting ready for this, or Western Civ. We actually had Western Civ back then. But then there were also a fairly significant contingent of women in their late 30s, 40s, and even 50s who were working on like further nursing certificates. But because they had been out of school so long, they had to take, History 101 again. And they were the best students. Even though this was a history class, it had nothing to do with nursing. They were just so happy to be learning again. These were bright women who didn't get a lot of stimulation, intellectual stimulation in their working class communities. And they were just so happy to be hearing about Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar and seeing what they remembered and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there were people in the state of Georgia, if you're 62 or older, you can go to college for free if there's space, any public college. I don't know if Florida has the same thing, but Georgia
California does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure Florida has something like that.
And I had one lady, this little elderly Black lady. She had been a postal worker for her whole career, and she had retired, and her husband were just home, and she decided she wanted to go to college. She wasn't even working on a degree. She just wanted to be in class learning, doing it purely for the effort. And of all the students I've ever had, that was the purest lover of intellectual life I ever met, was this little old lady in this
That's
little small
beautiful.
town, because she had absolutely nothing to gain. Not even earning a living as a professor, not even writing a book, nothing. She just wanted to sit there and learn. It does exist. Good little small towns. There's people in the
Yeah.
libraries who are keeping that flame
Yeah.
alive,
I got
giving a
students
speech
like
about
that.
the Civil War. Yeah,
They don't
giving a
care. They
speech
just
about
want
the
to learn.
Civil War and people. Yeah, it's there. It's just you don't see it. You don't see it. In my biblical Greek class, people there. Most of the class was younger students, but there were guys there in their 50s and 60s who came back to school just learned to read Greek when their career had died down. They had more time. They wanted to read the Bible in the original language. So you'd have people in their 20s and people in their 50s taking this class.
Right. That's beautiful. That's
It's
amazing.
out there. It needs to be cultivated.
Right.
Huh?
That's exactly it.
You guys are
That's the
making me.
key, right? We need to, uh,
Yeah.
reject the, Vivek Ramaswamy kind of mindset
Yeah.
and cultivate the cultural underpinnings of our society. And that's really what matters. That's what makes better
You know
citizens, not cogs in the machine.
what this keeps
Yeah.
making me think is that what we're talking about is. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's no way I'm pulling off a De Medici like garden thing. All right, I'm going to be a poor guy my whole life. All right, but that doesn't mean we can't find people like that and then use these historical cultural touchstones. Because like librarian, what you're describing with those women, remembering Julius Caesar, Alexander, like people remember this stuff
Mhm.
because it's deep in there, and we need to think of ourselves as well wizards
Yeah.
with these names are incantations like De Medici, and then pull this stuff up out of people and get them going in the direction that they naturally probably want to go. That little old Black lady, like that's human right there. That's why she's so great, because she's just being a person. I want to learn about the
Yeah.
world I'm in. This
Right.
is
Not for,
awesome. I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a meat sack with a brain in it. Holy
Yeah.
crap.
yeah.
Like let's
That's and
go.
that's amazing. All right, I got one more topic before we call it a day. Got a few more minutes, okay, librarian, if you could put me.
Okay.
So you mentioned studying Greek for the Bible, and there's in your writing there's a uh, definitive religious element to it in a lot of your posts, and you are not you don't come off as somebody that uses your own personal religious beliefs to preach or to kind of cudgel people. That sometimes we tend to have that a lot on the right, on the our side of the internet. um what a how do you um square your religious life, and I don't you don't even have to tell us what specific denomination or anything you are, but how does that come into your intellectual life? How do you coincide those two, and how do you present that towards the outside world?
Well, I don't. There's like been a couple of times when I've like argued about specific doctrine with people. I very much try to
Right.
avoid that.
So do I. That's a kind of a
I
policy of
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm basically an Orthodox catechumen. I haven't fully committed to it yet. I describe myself as Orthodox because I fully accept all the premises and I believe the theology and I believe the church and all those things. But where I live, my family life, I can't commit to the full spectrum of church attendance and everything that would be incumbent on someone. So I still call myself a catechumen.
Right.
So I don't judge anybody else, and I don't, oh, well, you're not, fasting like you're supposed to, so you suck. I don't do things that way. I like my spirituality to just sort of be evident in my writing as opposed to me having to spell it out through like direct exposition more than anything.
Right.
Um, I am a traditionalist and someone who believes, like all good right wing people do, in hierarchies, in transcendence, and an ultimate good behind everything else. Um, there's nothing true that's alien to God. There's nothing refined or noble or beautiful that is alien to God. And so I like to find truth and beauty and good in things and highlight that stuff. Um, to me, when I write about Big Trouble in Little China, I'm I'm talking about Christianity in the end, because I'm talking about people who are fighting against evil in their way, and that's a in that sense it's not an explicitly Christian story, but it has those elements, people transcending the limits of their physicality through courage, rising to something higher. There's a Christian message there deep down that is percolated through the culture into John
That's
Carpenter's
one of your
brain.
best pieces, by
Uh,
the way.
um,
Oh yeah. No, I'm
I had a
so
lot of
glad
fun
you
with
brought
that.
it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alex, you have to link
I
that in the
will. I will
podcast
for
episode.
sure.
That
Oh,
hey, that librarian, I don't
yeah.
know if I ever told you, but that article is the one that got me into Younger. That got me going down that road
Oh,
and
yeah.
eventually got me to
Mhm.
come around to the idea that holy shit, I've been Catholic this whole time. I thought I left, but I didn't.
Yep. And that, yeah,
It's awesome.
and that's the thing. So it all
Yeah,
links
man.
together in weird ways you
Yeah.
don't think about. One of the things I really try to do in my writing is just bring unexpected things to bear and show how they're connected.
Yeah.
You know, I'm I my the essay the other I keep referencing Cyrax, I don't mean to, but the mudsill theory I think I wrote about. I was writing about like anthropological theories in the pre-Civil War period. I related it to internet lolcows, to kind of show this idea of like, well, what do you do with these people who are just sort of unable to function in society? What does it mean to have a mudsill, and how do we treat people like that? What do we do? What do we owe them? I try to connect things from all over the place that fit together. It's all part of a single big coherent worldview.
Yeah.
I try to that's basically where I approach it from a kind of a spiritual
Right.
perspective. Um,
Well, welcome to the Orthodox Church, by the way. Being a lifelong member myself, you know, but it's difficult because I do live in the South also, and there's not a lot of Orthodox
mhm,
churches around here, and it's hard to it's hard to be a every Sunday religious person. It's hard to
yeah,
stick to the fast because uh, a lot of times people say, there's no good Christian art, which is nonsense. I mean, I
no,
think that when it comes to religious art, I think the Roman Catholics own painting, but we own literature. Sorry, guys. Dostoevsky,
yeah,
Dostoevsky's on top,
Not even gonna argue that. Not even
right?
gonna argue it. It's just
But
correct.
one thing that a lot of you know attempts at contemporary Christian like literature, for example, fall flat because their Christians are too perfect. And the reality is that we are really crappy Christians. At least I am, and that's just the reality of it is that, sin is an illness and we have it. And it's it's never believable when you read a novel or any work of art where the religious individual or the main character is a perfect example of Christianity. It's like a superhero of Christ, and
yeah,
it's silly and it fails because
Ugh.
we are not superheroes
yeah.
of Christ. We even
No, they're not
They're not
people.
people.
They're
And
caricatures. They're
if you
caricatures.
guys haven't
Yeah.
read the novel Laurus, right, by Eugene Vodolesky, right, he's a
Yeah.
Russian-Ukrainian writer, and he's a contemporary writer, and Laurus came out maybe 3, 4 years ago. It is my example of the perfect, Christian writing from an Orthodox perspective, of course. And I also highly recommend the movie The Island, the Russian movie The Island, not the island with like.
Yeah. I
Right.
know that one.
And
Yeah.
if you are interested in some of the kind of spiritual ideas behind orthodoxy and, the approach, I think that movie really illustrates it very well. And so does the novel Hours. And obviously Dostoevsky. That's the book that Dostoevsky's what brought me back to religion upon my numerous readings of his novels. But yeah, I think what you
Hmm.
said was perfect. I mean, and if you makes you feel better or whatever, I think that it does show in your writing. It does. Uh, there's a level of intellectual spirituality and like grace that comes through in the way you approach things. Even in your articles about the Mudsill individuals,
Yeah.
there's an element of that. We're even though these people are a sinkhole upon our lives and societies, we're still called to love them no matter what. And ultimately, they're sick. They're ill, right? They're ill with
Hmm.
a
Yes.
spiritual disease, and they have just as much value to God than we do, in a way. And it's a hard concept to understand, especially from a materialistic, Vivek Ramaswamy kind of mindset where,
Yeah.
you know, is he a compatible cog in my Microsoft machine, And
Yeah.
it's hard because how do you approach those kind of people, especially when they're your family members? It's tough. And like I thought that those two pieces together were very well written and very thoughtful, even though they were I would say the spirituality was a little bit hidden behind some internet snark making fun of
Yeah.
Cyrex or whatever. And I hate
Yeah.
you for now that the fact that I know who that is now, it makes me kind of mad at you, but you know what? That's still good. That's still good. But yeah,
Let me put a coda on the story that I told about my relative Gollum. Um, my little girls have seen him, and they've seen him like go berserk and start screaming and stuff. And we told them, we tried telling them that he's sick and stuff like that. And my oldest daughter said, she didn't use that name, but she said, "Daddy, Gollum doesn't have Jesus in his heart. If he had Jesus in his heart, he wouldn't do that." And just cut through all the excuses we were making. And she understood exactly what the problem was. And spontaneously, her and her little sister spontaneously said a prayer for him,
that's
you
I
know,
mean, children
and
are
yeah,
amazing. I
yeah,
have a six.
they
I
show the
do, and
way,
I have a six
yeah,
year old, and sometimes some of the stuff she says is just like blows me away. Like she'll say something that like I have to like turn around because like it brings tears to my eyes because it like
yeah,
it's so pure and true and perfect, and it's
yeah.
so it goes so beyond the understanding that we have as adults because we've become like so numb to that purity of soul that a young child has, and it's amazing. It's one of the greatest things about being a parent.
Well, one thing I tell kids in my class, they'll ask about, being an adult or something like that. And I say, you guys, I've got a lot of advantages over you and stuff. I'm older, I can do what I want. Have a lot of people telling you what to do and stuff. But the best quality that you kids have is that you just instinctively recoil from inauthenticity and lies. Adults live in a world of lies. If society is a machine, lies are the oil. It just lubricates
Right.
everything. We just tell the amount of lies you just deal with as a day-to-day basis as an adult is just, especially in the school system, it's just staggering. But kids, they have this mentality. I compare it to a boxing trainer. Guys, they say with fighters, you never listen to them, you look at them. Guys out there fighting, just getting pounded, just getting crap beat out of him. Sits down at the end of the fight or the end of the round, and he's on his stool. And the manager comes over. He says, "Hey, can you keep going?" The guy's like, "Yeah, yeah, I can keep fighting." But you look at his face, he's busted up, he's done. If he goes back out there, he's going to get killed on his feet. You never listen to him, you look at him. I said, you kids, you never listen to us, you look at us. The things we say to you, it just flies over your head, it goes in one ear out the other, but you watch us. And being around kids all day long, it's not the most financially rewarding job, it's not the most respected job, but it keeps me honest because I know these people are watching me all the time. I don't ask them to do anything. I don't do if I tell them to read a book, it's because I've read two. If I tell them to exercise, it's because I did it that morning. If I tell them to be all that, they being around kids keeps you honest, which is a great reason to have kids and or work with kids.
Right. That's actually such a fantastic point, and that's true. And it's even true of young adults and young 20-year-olds in a way,
Yeah.
because I feel, as a 41-year-old who is around a lot of young 20-year-olds straight out of college and stuff, they do watch everything because we are their templates in a way of what they're going to become. And that's why I find it very important I often invite all my younger coworkers over for Thanksgiving and that type of thing, because I want
Yeah.
to see them. I want them to see me with my wife and my kid, and I want them to see what a normal, not maybe not normal, but a successful, functional relationship is,
Yeah.
and
Functional.
what they can
Yeah.
have if they do.
Remember when functional was normal?
Right,
That was so
right.
great.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you,
Yes. Yes.
Librarian, man. I
Yeah,
I
man.
think we
Thank
Real
you so
pleasure.
much for having me. I really
I've
great.
been looking forward to this one for a while now, and I know we can go on for like 5 more hours, but I know you got to go early today,
Yeah.
and I want to have you back on for sure. You're always invited, and I look forward every time I see a little notification of your Substack pop up. I make time during my day to stop and read it because I know it's going to be something
Thank
good.
you.
And Fisto, once again, I love you, man. It's great to have you.
Pleasure to
I
be
look
here, sir.
forward
Thank
to
you.
our. I
Thank
look
you
forward
both.
to every Wednesday. I look forward to this conversation. And for all the listeners, thank you very much for sticking with us for a whole year. And it's exciting to start a brand
Woo!
new 2025. We're entering the second quarter
Yeah,
of this
boy.
century, a historical time in our country's history, and a historical time in everything. And for all you listeners, yeah,
Buckle up,
buckle up.
folks.
For
That's
all
all.
you listeners,
That's all I
yeah,
got. Buckle up, boys.
please
Man. Here we
go
go.
to Librarian's Substack and hit follow if you don't. And then if you enjoy this episode and you enjoy all our episodes, please go ahead and follow the podcast Substack, and please follow us on what's that called? Spotify and YouTube, and hit like on all the videos, because we gotta hit those numbers for Mr. Vivek, right? Because that's the stuff that matters in the world.
We don't want to get turned
Yeah, I
into
don't want to be.
sludge.
Yeah, I don't want
Please.
to be like
Please.
If you're not podcasting 8 hours a week, you're
right,
just wasting
because
it.
if you don't
Yeah.
hit like on YouTube and on Spotify, and don't hit like and follow,
Guys, if you're not liking our podcast 80 hours a week, what
right,
are you
an
even doing?
H-1B
What are you even
visa
doing with your life?
podcaster is going to take
Yeah, it's
over.
gonna be revoked. And you're gonna get deported to
Yeah,
Greenland.
I'm gonna get
okay.
Oh
That's
no,
gonna be what happens.
we're gonna be replaced by H-1B visas, and they're gonna take over our podcast, and it's gonna be
Can
the
you
end.
can you imagine an H-1B1 Indian visa guy trying to swear like I
No,
do? Can you just imagine that?
But
I can't.
I am on an H-1B visa for podcasting from Romania. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I have to admit, I am a pro. I'm gonna get deported. Sorry, guys. But yeah, Librarian, thank you so much, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors. And I can't wait to have you back on sometimes later this year when we schedule it. And good night, everybody.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Bye bye.